Hello everyone, and welcome back to Poképaint, the series where I draw new Pokémon to inhabit my fan-made Pokémon region based on Florida, the Gladios region. Today, contrary to what I just said, I won't actually be drawing any new Pokémon. Instead, I will be tackling an arguably just as important subject, that being the player characters. As you may know, ever since the beginning of the series, the player character has been an integral part of the Pokémon experience, being a sort of faceless vessel for the player to project themselves onto and experience the world through. Although in the first generation there was only a singular option for the player, that being the character defaultly known as Red, starting partway through the second generation we would get a second option in a new girl character, giving us the first small glimpse of character customization that we get in the series, beyond just customizing your name. For some time, the standard boy-girl duology was the main choice for our character customization, until later generations when further customization options were implemented, like skin tone, hair color and length, eye color, and in some iterations, in-game apparel options. Although the customization and self-projectionable aspects of the player characters are arguably the most important part, there is still an undeniable sense of unique individuality that the base player characters have in every game to this day. Even though the player characters' personalities are purposefully less defined in service of the previously stated ideas, there are fundamental traits given to each PC in order to give them some semblance of individuality. This can be more easily seen in the manga and in excess materials, where versions of the PCs have their character traits expanded on and more concretely explored. Not only is there an important sense of individuality in all player characters, it is also apparent that these characters also serve to represent the target demographic, that being 10 to 15-year-olds, and also the real-life region by incorporating fashion and culture into their designs. Whereas the original characters usually were designed in cool 90s school-age apparel, and later on hiking and sportwear adjacent outfits, the more recent regions have taken far more consideration into using aesthetics inspired by regionally distinct apparel. Like how the Generation 7 characters have obvious Hawaiian/tropical vacation inspirations in their designs, or how the Generation 8 looks are inspired by clothing options common in England and Scotland. Drawing human characters in the anime-adjacent Pokemon style is actually relatively challenging for me. Whenever I draw humans, it's usually in a conceptual or portrait style, and I also rarely draw characters any younger than their late teens. Unlike for Season 2, where I leaned hard into the blank slate idea, I wanted to give these characters a smidge more individuality, and I accomplished this mainly in how I related them to the deep south of America, which I'll touch on in a moment. Aiming for the middle of the road in terms of representing the target audience, I imagined my characters would be around 13. Unlike in the Pokemon anime, where it is established as a hard rule that every new Pokemon trainer is 10 years old when they start, the characters in the games are a little more diverse in age, and usually older than that, ranging from as young as 10 to 11 in the case of Red in the original games, and all the way up to Callum and Serena from X and Y, who apart from the anime are most commonly depicted as between 16 and 17. I said this the last time I drew Pokemon protagonists back in, oh my god, that was 2021? Anyways, I said that I liked this detail because it made the Pokemon world feel more like a real place, in the way that there are differing Pokemon trainer starting ages around the world, in a similar way to how different countries have different driving age limits, for instance. That is, if the game world operates like the anime in the way that a Pokemon journey is some sort of standard event for a coming of age, which I don't actually think is the case based on my headcanon, but I'm going on a side tangent. On top of that, the other main thing I wanted to represent in my trainer characters was how the fashion is directly inspired by the real-life region of inspiration, as I've come to prefer when the Pokemon protagonists have very regionally specific apparel depending on their appearance. Since Florida is in a region of the United States that is unofficially referred to as the Deep South, I wanted to reference the culture and fashion of that area in the way that I designed my characters. The real-life region is characterized largely by a strong religious and conservative culture. However, going overly specific in these inspirations probably wouldn't translate very well to a less serious Pokemon title. Instead, I went for a more specific inspiration in the way that the previously mentioned culture affects the lifestyle of the area. The southern United States is stereotypically characterized by their small farm town communities, and as such, farm life is super important to the region. I referenced this in the hometown, but I also wanted to take it a step further and strove for a farm lifestyle look for my protagonists. And that twofold representation works since the hometown of the story is one of these small farm towns, so it makes sense that in-universe the protagonists would be dressed in this way. The inclusion of the baseball cap was an easy decision that I made way before I started designing them, as not only do most Pokemon protagonists usually have a baseball cap, or at least a regionally appropriate hat, the baseball cap for the South just made total sense. Another easy choice was the inclusion of overalls, though they're a less common article of clothing in farmers of the Deep South nowadays, and more of an over-characterization of a stereotype that doesn't really exist anymore. It still served as a unique design idea that both referenced the inspiration in an overtly obvious way, but also to distinguish them from existing protagonists who haven't donned similar outerwear to my knowledge in the main series at this point. In terms of making the protagonists more believable as main series characters, it's also important that they are made visually distinct from one another, and not just like boy-girl versions of one another, which is a common mistake that I see a lot of other Fakemon artists make. I accomplished this beyond the obvious ways in subtle differences in the way that they dressed. For Trainer B, his travel bag references military rucksacks, as military culture and as an extension national pride is important to the real-life area, especially in the boys and men from the area. And taking another route for Trainer A's coat/vest, it is vaguely inspired by decorative clothing that's worn most often in rodeo shows. Although decorative clothing is more of a unisex thing in rodeos, the half coat is usually made out to be a specifically female article. So I thought that it would be an appropriate inclusion. Coming to the end of my design process and coming up with names was a difficult task at first, but at some point I came up with a naming inspiration that made complete sense, if not being in its origin a little bit dark for Pokemon. In the United States, victims of crime or otherwise those who are being referred to in a legal setting who are either unidentifiable or chosen to remain anonymous are given the stand-in name of John Doe. In the cases of unidentified victims of violent crime, which is the most common use, the name is used as a stand-in usually until an official name or identity can be procured, a term that, if you think about it, is remarkably similar to the player character's default names. Pokemon Trainer Red from the original series is only called Red when he's either not the protagonist or until you change his name to your own. So therefore, it's a stand-in. In official terms, the female version of a John Doe is a Jane Doe, so in that way we have our names for the player characters, John and Jane. On top of that reasoning, they also fit as regionally appropriate names, as names with either Western European or biblical origins are the most common in this area of the world that Florida finds itself in. So, here are my player characters, John and Jane, for the Gladios region. Beyond your choice of starter, the default player character is one of the more important choices that you'll make in the early game, so let me know which one you'd choose in the comments below. Of course, in modern Pokemon stories as well as in the Gladios region, you would presumably have more customizable options both in physical characteristics, but also in clothing options, which I imagine you could find in cities across the region. Maybe even making customization more of a mini-game or a side quest, where you could mix and match items that you find all around the map. Maybe, for an example, you would find a tropical-inspired fit in Tropo Town, complete with a Hawaiian-style t-shirt, or maybe you could find a straw farmer's hat in Grestate Town. I feel like something like that would make the character customization a more engaging and rewarding part of the game. Either way, tell me your ideas of ways that you could customize your own characters as well in the comments below. That was just supposed to be a little note at the end of the video, but who knows? Now that I say it out loud, this is an idea that I might expand upon in a future episode because I think that's kind of a cool thought. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this possibly shorter episode of Poképaint and are excited for more Gladios region content in the near future. I originally planned to get right into drawing the gym leaders after this, and the way those videos would probably be set up would be something like designing the ace Pokemon first, and then the gym leader, and then going over the team and movesets and etc. But as a note, the first gym leader doesn't really have their own ace in the way that all of the Pokemon that they use already exist in the Gladios region, so I may not draw a Pokemon for that video entirely. I haven't decided yet. So because of that, I'm tossing around the idea of making another video solely based on designing new Pokemon before I get into tackling the gym leaders, because I don't really want to leave you hanging with another video without any new monsters in it. Either way, if you want to see this video and all of my content before everyone else does, you can get my content early amongst other perks by supporting me on Patreon. Thank you STE and Alan Michael White for your support. That'll do it for now. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like. And if you want to see more like it, then turn on the bell and subscribe to get notified when I upload next.